Hey guys, this is bkoopa666 here again. Hopefully the audio sounds better in this video due to the fact that I won't be whispering into the microphone to avoid awkward stares from family members. I'm still fairly new to recording, so hopefully I won't sound like an old man yelling into a telephone here. So I've had some time to kill this afternoon, and I decided I would kind of recap the whole nostalgia issue in Donkey Kong Country Returns. This is a fairly controversial topic, I know, and I've kind of skimmed over it in my prior review. Um, Now that the game has been out for a while and quite a few reviewers have, you know, given it a playthrough, nostalgia has become kind of a polarizing topic. Reviewers pretty much either cream their pants over the nostalgia and they say because of the nostalgia, Donkey Kong Country Returns is the best country of all times. It blows everything else out of the water and, generic praise, or that the game is ruined as a result of not being a carbon copy of DKC and that it is not worthy of the country title. There's some bullshit. I'm kind of hoping to take a middle ground here because while I believe that Returns is not as good as it could have been due to a lack of nostalgia that could easily have been inserted into the game is still damn amazing and it's a great standalone title. Retro did what they could to make this game the best it could be, obviously, but I think Shigeru Miyamoto really shot them in the foot in terms of nostalgia for reasons I have no idea why. And now that we pretty much know everything there is to know about the game, I figured I would take one final crack on nostalgia. So, pretty much everyone who talks about the game lacking in nostalgia says so in regards to the enemies in the game. From day one, Retro goes off to IGN for interviews about their new game, and they keep on bringing up that, oh, by the way, there are no crocodiles in the game, ha ha ha. And they have the little laughs and the parentheses just to rub salt in the wound. And, I honestly didn't need them to tell me that because, hey, there's obviously aren't any Kremlings in the trailer, or even old enemies for that matter. Anyways, pretty much, the no crocodile statement kind of generated a mixed reaction. Some people, including myself, kind of blew our load all over the place and started ranting about how their removal was sheer idiocy, while others kept on saying that, hey, the tikis look cool, they hypnotize shit, so give them a chance. And, I I didn't really see any originality from the tikis in the E3 trailer, which were pretty much Goombas in drum form. Goomba clones, I called them at the time, but then I kind of grudgingly decided to wait until release before passing much more judgment. And quite frankly, I don't think I was ever really proven wrong. I played the whole game, and I haven't seen a single Tiki whose role as an enemy I don't think could have been filled more interestingly by Kremlings. As of right now, the Tiki, I think the most universally loved Tiki in the game seems to be the flaming ones that you have to blow out. You blow them and they go out. But I also like the main boss Tikis, the instruments, but I don't think they're even properly utilized because they have Tikis as a generic species have potential, but was it ever really used in the game? I mean, the enemies were pretty much reduced to generic platforms, and the bosses were just generic punching bags. Instead of hypnotizing badasses like I think a lot of people were hoping for, I know some people wanted them to be rabbits. Ugh, I'm gonna go there. But one of my ideas for them was like for co-op actually, like a tiki comes on stage, hypnotizes your buddy, and then your buddy tries to kick your ass for a set period of time, maybe the rest of the level. But no, I mean, in the game we have right now, you have to actually look for interesting tikis, whereas in the originals, you have to struggle to find boring Kremlings. And yet, so people still think it's a good move, and I still, for the life of me, can't understand their reasoning. I mean, nowadays there's pretty much a few generic digs at the Kremlings when people try to say the tikis are superior. I mean, first and foremost, they just go out of the way and say tikis are better because of gameplay. And because it's obvious that you have to jump on their head, that makes them immediately better enemies than Kremlings. And I don't see why Tikis are really that different in that regard because all you have to do with Kremlings is basically enlarge their snout a little bit because it's obvious you have to fucking jump on them because they're not on fire or have spikes growing out of their heads. I don't really buy the gameplay argument because the audience that the game is targeted toward is clearly not the audience who needs to be spoon fed which enemies need to be jumped on. You know, Look at the difficulty in the game. In just the main game, not to mention mirror mode and shiny golds and all that extra shit. I mean, I don't think I'm wrong in saying that the kind of player who needs to be catered to like that would play the game for more than a week anyway. And even in the case that Retro wants to cater to that audience, you could just have that fucking pig pop up in the background and tell them to jump on the Kremling. It's not rocket science. To the contrary, it's so easy that Scooby Kong could figure it out, honestly. The other argument I've been seeing here and there, and this one just it makes me almost angry because it's the sheer stupidity of it is just mind blowing. The argument is that if the Kremlings were in the game would be a carbon copy of Donkey Kong Country. Dear God, if you're a listener and you have ever typed these words into your keyboard, I would very much appreciate it if you went back to middle school, learn which statements you're supposed to put an equal sign between, and when you come back, kindly stop lowering the average IQ of every poster on the website you're posting on. Seriously. I mean, if Kremlings win returns, I guess every other new element of the game that Retro adds is suddenly invalidated, just because the enemy species are the same. All the new levels, all the new environments, the new music, the new cutscenes, everything. It's all the same because there are crocodiles in the game. Imagine playing the same game, but instead of tiki enemies, there are more personable Kremlings in their place. Not only would you have an awesome game still, but I could make you an argument that the game is better because of the overall increase of charisma. You know? I mean, the game wouldn't be the same with the possible new Kremlings we could see, because obviously not every old Kremling is going to be copy pasted in. And I'd like to reiterate that, you know, Kremlings can be redesigned, new species can be made, and if you can't come up with a Kremling to pretty much fill any enemy role in the game, I think you're creatively challenged. Sorry. But yeah, plus the game isn't identical because of the whole fucking original soundtrack. You know, it's not identical because Ramby's in the game. It's not identical because there's Kong letters or bananas, right? Alright, that shit's just too infuriating to continue with, honestly. And it's not just with Kremlings, by the way. I did talk about Tiki Zings before in my review, and I ought to bring that back up here because it's relevant, honestly. Okay, so we have the Zingers, which are the wasps from DKC, which would still fit perfectly in this game, about hypnotized fucking mutant animals, but they're not there, and we get wooden balls with spikes and faces. My first reaction when I saw Tiki Zings in World 3 was kind of an "are you shitting me" combined with "what the fuck." It's as if Retro wanted zingers, but not zingers. Tiki Zings fill the same role. They're still annoying. For fuck's sake, they even have zing in their name, but they're not zingers, which I just think takes away from the overall nostalgia. The importance of which I can get to in a minute, but I digress. And again, not saying to copy paste every single old enemy into the mix. I mean, all the old games have new enemies, so Retro, of course, can put in new enemies here, but at least a new enemy here or there, just a throwback to the original, and not just Miyamoto getting moist from the idea of arcade DK. And I feel kind of the same way about Tiki Tong, the final boss. I won't even get started on how painfully generic his boss fight is, but look at his design. Ignore the cloned hands and look at the eye. Who does it remind you of, man? Watch the boss fight or play it yourself. You know how he fakes you out? Where have you seen that before, huh? Oh yeah, the fake credits say hi, don't they? I mean, Tiki Tong is pretty much just inferior K. Rool, and I don't see why that had to be the case when K. Rool is clearly still loved by fans. Kremlings or no Kremlings, he definitely should have been in the mix. Um, yeah, the other arguments out there I've seen about how Kremlings make a less compelling storyline, or how the Tikis are better villains, or some other garbage. Honestly, Nintendo spits on storyline half the time. Miyamoto goes out of his way nowadays to say, "Fuck storyline, make Galaxy and New Super Mario Bros. Wii simper." It's never been a concern for him, so I don't think it ever will be, and it's not a valid reason to just rule out the classic enemies. God. Obviously, DK hasn't been as big as Mario or Zelda in the past decade, so kicking Bowser and Ganondorf out of a installment isn't gonna completely axe them from the franchise. Whereas the same thing can't really be saying about K. Rool, who has pretty much been out of business due to Miyamoto essentially tying DK up and having Payon gang rape him in Nintendo's basement for several years. him being out of this game pretty much puts his future in question in one fell swoop, which is kind of unfortunate for fans of him, such as myself. And I touched on the charisma of the game with the Kremlings, and in the same breath, I kind of have to throw in the Kong family. Another generalization people seem to make about them is that if the Kong family's in the game, every single fucking Kong has to be in the game too, shoehorned in with minigames like the ports. Like, oh my god, Tiny can't be in the game, Chunky can't be in the game, we better not have Lanky. Fuck you, Lanky's awesome. He's a goddamn necessity. But, oh yeah, I don't remember anyone asking for all that. The main Kongs can pretty much be ruled down to Cranky, Funky, Candy, and Cranky's already in. Funky can just replace Super Kong, and Candy's Safe Shack can just appear over the pig. It's not hard to deduce. And then the last thing I'd like to just bring up are the level design. I've already come out with my positions on the levels. I've already basically touched myself to how awesome they are. I mean, the simple brilliance of the levels, how they all flow, and, there's always the complaint here or there, though, about no water levels, no snow worlds, no other animal buddies besides Rambi. Level design sucks, like the island itself, how it's not DK's head. And, I don't think it's really as big a deal as it is with the enemies, but, all these little things kind of build up, I believe. It would have contributed more to an overall feel as a true Country follow-up. And here I'm going to kind of wrap this up and talk about why I think nostalgia is important, why all of this matters, in other words. And Retro, actually, they did a bunch of stuff right in terms of gameplay nostalgia. I mean, I talked about this before, how they position the items in the stage, how they position enemies, while the enemies themselves are not the same. Their their roles in the game are still similar. And I would argue that actually like probably 85% of gamers who picked up returns, which contributed to it actually surpassing DKC3 in terms of sales, I hear. They bought the game because of pretty much the fond memories they have of the original. They remember the gameplay, they remember the characters and all that shit. Retro nails the gameplay. If they blindly slap on old enemies and ignore gameplay, we'd get New Super Mario Bros. Wii, a worse-selling New Super Mario Bros. Wii. The music, the remixes they got right. They put them in good places. I love it. And the characters, I think that Miyamoto caused them to fall flat. And yes, it was Miyamoto. He talks to Retro. He says, Retro, the Kremlings don't need to come back. We need to refresh the enemies or whatever. Because fucking Bowser doesn't come in every single game. I'm jealous of Rare pretty much one-upping me in every single way possible back in the 90s, so, they don't need to come back for a good game to be made, I'll admit. But I think that they are a prerequisite for a superior return of a Country Series game. And that a few old Kongs and Animal Buddies thrown in there can even increase this superior return, the magnitude of the return. I don't think any of these things are going to contribute to the sales, actually. I mean, no shit. They're not going to make the game, they're not going to skyrocket it up any higher, but I just think that, it will leave a better overall mark on the legacy of the franchise. So yeah, that's enough for now. People are already probably asleep at the keyboard or jumping down my throat about how nostalgia doesn't matter. If DKCR had metal cubes as characters, I'd still play. Yeah. Go ahead. I'll be listening with a bowl of popcorn in my lap, laughing my ass off. And, I'll be happy to discuss this matter with anyone who believes they have a valid opinion and who wishes to tell it to me in a calm and rational manner. Preferably with a bit of humor thrown in, but, that's beside the point. Okay, until then, that's it for now, folks. Hope you enjoyed listening. Have a nice evening.